Jack had been driving for hours on a long, empty highway that stretched between two quiet towns. The road seemed endless, lined with tall trees that swayed gently in the summer breeze. The sun hung high in the sky, casting warm golden light across the asphalt. His truck hummed steadily as he kept his hands relaxed on the steering wheel, but his sharp eyes never stopped scanning the road ahead. Even though he was no longer in the Marines, old habits stayed with him. He had learned to notice details, to stay alert, and to always be aware of his surroundings, as he passed a faded green sign that read, "Rest Stop, 1 mile." Jack felt a small wave of relief. His shoulders were sore from sitting too long, and he needed to stretch his legs. He also wanted a cold drink to fight the dry heat of the afternoon. He flicked on his signal and pulled off the highway when he saw the narrow road leading to the rest stop. The rest stop was quiet and nearly empty. Tucked between a few clusters of pine trees, a single vending machine stood near a row of wooden benches, and a couple of old picnic tables sat under a tin roof. A few birds hopped around the edges of the parking lot, pecking at crumbs left behind by earlier travelers. The air smelled faintly of warm pavement and pine needles. Jack parked his truck in a corner space, away from the main area. That was something he always did. He liked having a clear view of everything. He turned off the engine and sat still. For a moment, just listening to the soft, ticking sound of the cooling engine. It was peaceful here, almost too peaceful. He rolled his shoulders and stepped out of the truck, the hot pavement radiating through the soles of his boots as he stretched. His arms above his head, he scanned the rest stop like he always did, not even thinking about it. It was second nature to him after years of training. He looked for anything: unusual people acting nervous, vehicles that seemed out of place, movements that didn't match the calm surroundings. There were only a few cars parked in the lot, and most of them looked empty. A light breeze brushed past, carrying the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of highway traffic. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to relax. It was rare for him to slow down like this. Life after the Marines had been quieter, but part of him still felt wired, like a switch that never fully turned off. He walked slowly toward the vending machine, fishing some coins from his pocket. He watched his reflection on the machine's glass as he pressed the buttons, still alert without realizing it. A cold bottle of water clattered down, and he twisted the cap open with one hand, taking a long sip. The water felt good, cool against the dry heat. He glanced around the parking lot again. The shadows were short under the bright afternoon sun, and the entire place seemed lazy, calm, and uneventful. But Jack didn't mind the quiet. He liked moments like this, small breaks where nothing demanded his attention. It gave him time to breathe, to just be present. He thought about how different this was from his old life. Back then, there was no silence, only noise, orders, and the rush of adrenaline. Now, silence was his closest friend. He walked toward a bench to sit down for a few minutes. The wood felt warm under his hands as he lowered himself onto it. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the heat seep through his skin. In the distance, a truck rumbled past on the highway, fading into silence again. Everything seemed completely normal, like any other stop on a long road trip. But as Jack sat there, sipping water and watching the still world around him, something deep inside stayed quietly awake, like an old guard dog resting with one eye open. He didn't know it yet, but this quiet, ordinary moment was about to change. This peaceful rest stop would soon become the center of something far from peaceful. And the calm he was feeling now would be replaced by something sharp and urgent, the kind of feeling he hadn't experienced in years. But for now, he simply sat in the warmth, unaware that just a few steps away, someone desperately needed his help. Jack sat quietly on the bench, letting the soft wind cool his face as he finished the last sip of water. His eyes wandered lazily across the parking lot. At first, nothing stood out. A silver sedan was parked under the shade of a tall pine. A lone delivery van hummed as its driver rested inside, head tipped back. Everything looked ordinary. Until his gaze paused on the far bench near the vending machine canopy. There they were. A young black girl and an older white man sat side by side, yet there was something strangely out of rhythm about them. They didn't look like a father and daughter on a road trip, or even like relatives waiting together. The man's posture was loose and relaxed, his legs stretched out, phone balanced in one hand as he lazily scrolled. But the girl's body told a different story, one of quiet tension. She was small, maybe 15 or 16, with braided hair that caught the sunlight like strands of dark silk. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles pale from pressure. She stared straight ahead, not looking at the man, not looking at anything, as if her mind had floated somewhere far away. Her shoulders were stiff, her jaw locked in place. Jack noticed she hadn't moved for several minutes, not even to sip the soda can resting untouched beside her. Jack tilted his head slightly, watching. Something about her stillness felt unnatural, like a statue pretending to breathe. The man said something low, his lips moving without lifting his eyes from his phone. The girl didn't answer. She just gave the smallest nod, so small that if Jack had blinked, he would have missed it. His instincts twitched. Over the years, Jack had learned to trust these quiet warnings inside him. They were never loud or dramatic, just a faint hum, like static before a storm. Most people walked past scenes like this without thinking twice. But Jack's mind had been trained to look beyond what people showed on the surface. He shifted his weight on the bench and kept watching discreetly. The man seemed calm, almost bored. But every so often, he flicked his eyes toward the girl, checking on her as if making sure she didn't move. Jack caught the flicker of irritation on the man's face when she shifted slightly, like a leash tightening invisibly between them. Jack's stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. Couples on road trips laugh, share snacks, stretch their legs. Parents fuss over their kids, friends talk. But here there was only silence, and silence this heavy meant something. It was like watching two people sit in the same world yet be trapped in two completely different cages. The girl's shoes were dusty, her clothes slightly wrinkled, and her small backpack sat at her feet as though she'd dropped it quickly, not placed it. There was no phone in her hand, no earbuds, nothing to distract her. She just sat perfectly still. Eyes distant but alert in a way that only someone afraid could be. Jack rubbed his jaw slowly, pretending to look at the trees as he studied them from the corner of his eye. The man laughed at something on his phone too. Loud, too forced. The sound cracked the quiet like glass. The girl flinched almost imperceptibly. That was the moment. Jack's thoughts stopped drifting and locked into sharp focus. He didn't know who they were. He didn't know their story, but he knew body language, fear, and control. He had seen soldiers freeze like that under command. He had seen hostages hold that same tight stillness in war zones, like they were trying to shrink themselves into air. And now, here it was again, hidden in plain sight. At an empty rest stop on a sunny afternoon, Jack felt a pulse of unease move through him. He stood up slowly, tossing his empty bottle into the trash with deliberate calm, his mind already working like clockwork, gears turning quietly. He wasn't sure what was happening yet, but he knew he had to stay close, to watch. Something deep inside whispered that this moment mattered. The world around them stayed lazy and warmed the soft hum of insects, the gentle rustle of pine branches. But Jack's focus narrowed like a scope locking onto a target. He had no idea that what he saw next would change everything. Jack leaned casually against the trash can, pretending to scroll on his phone, but his attention stayed locked on the strange pair across the parking lot. He had learned long ago how to blend in, how to watch without looking like he was watching. His expression stayed calm, almost bored. But inside, his thoughts were sharp and quick. Like a knife quietly sliding from its sheath, the man shifted slightly on the bench, crossing one leg over the other. His phone was still glowing in his hand. He seemed so relaxed it almost felt fake, like a mask that didn't quite fit his face. Every now and then he would glance at the girl, quick and sharp, as if silently reminding her not to try anything. Jack noticed it. The girl noticed it too. She still hadn't touched the soda can beside her. Her hands remained in her lap, fingers laced tightly, but now Jack could see them tremble, ever so slightly. Her eyes stayed fixed on a distant spot in the parking lot, but there was tension there. A restless energy behind her stillness, like a bird waiting for the cage door to crack open. Then something happened. It was small. So small that anyone else would have missed it completely. As the man leaned back, looking down at his phone, the girl slowly shifted her gaze. Her eyes met Jack's from across the parking lot. It was only for a second, maybe even less, but it felt longer, heavier. There was no fear in her expression, not exactly, more like desperation wrapped in silence. And then she moved her hand. She raised it slightly from her lap, and with her thumb tucked under her fingers, she curled them down, trapping the thumb inside her fist. Jack's chest tightened. He knew that signal. It was the silent hand-scene, the one taught in self-defense classes and used by people in danger when they can't speak out loud. Fold the thumb into the palm and cover it with the fingers. It meant, help me. I'm not safe. It was a secret scream wrapped in silence. She held it for just 1 second, then released her hand and returned it quietly to her lap. Her face stayed blank, her body still. The man never looked up from his phone. He hadn't seen it. But Jack had, and everything inside him shifted. The air suddenly felt sharper, heavier, as if the summer warmth had turned to ice. The peaceful hum of insects and the distant rush of highway faded away. All he could hear was the steady, controlled beat of his own heart, slow and powerful like a drum in his chest. That one small gesture had changed everything. Jack's training surged back into his veins without him even thinking. He scanned the area in seconds. 2 cars nearby, 1 van with tinted windows, 3 exits. 1 vending machine building that could block sidelines. A security camera pointing toward the picnic tables, but probably old and broken. No one else was around. It was just the 3 of them. And now he knew this wasn't just a quiet stop. This was something dangerous, something urgent. Jack forced himself to stay still. If he reacted too fast, the man might notice. If the man sensed danger, he could panic, grab the girl, run, or worse. Jack needed to move carefully, quietly, like he was stepping across a thin sheet of glass that could shatter under his boots. The girl's eyes had dropped again. She didn't look back at him. But Jack saw the tiniest twitch in her shoulder, a flinch every time the man shifted. She was waiting, hoping she had taken the risk to send that signal. That meant she believed someone might see it. That meant she believed he might see it. Jack couldn't let her down. He drew a slow, silent breath, feeling the calm weight of decision settle in his body like armor. He had acted in dangerous moments before, and he knew one thing. When someone silently asks for help, you don't wait, you act. His hand slid into his pocket and wrapped around his phone. His thumb unlocked the screen without looking. Every movement had to be invisible, as casual as scratching an itch. His face stayed blank as he lifted the phone and angled it like he was checking a message. But instead, he opened the keypad and typed 3 numbers. 9-1-1. He didn't hit call yet. Not yet. He needed to stay close enough to see everything, far enough not to raise suspicion, and calm enough to keep the man from noticing. Jack's eyes flicked back to the girl. She hadn't moved again, but her shoulders were drawn tight as wire, and her gaze stayed low. She looked like someone balancing on the edge of breaking. Jack lowered the phone slowly, sliding it back into his pocket. The plan was forming in his mind, fast and clean. He knew he couldn't just call for help and wait from a distance. If the man tried to leave with her, they could be gone before help arrived. He needed to keep them here somehow, but first, he needed confirmation. He needed to be sure, because if he acted too early and was wrong, he could cause chaos for no reason. But if he hesitated and he was right, she might disappear forever. Jack's jaw tightened. He decided he would get closer. Subtle, slow, casual. And if she gave any sign again of him, the smallest one, he would act without hesitation. The world around them still looked the same. The warm breeze still moved the pine branches. The highway still hummed faintly in the distance. But to Jack, everything had changed. The quiet rest stop was no longer quiet. It was now a battlefield in disguise. Jack sat frozen for a moment, though his body didn't show it. From the outside, he looked like any other traveler lazily scrolling his phone. But inside, his mind was firing like lightning. He knew what he had just seen wasn't his imagination. That girl's small hidden gesture, her thumb tucked into her palm and fingers folded over, had been clear, deliberate, and filled with silent fear. And now he had to decide, fast. The longer he waited, the more danger she could be in. He shifted slightly on the bench, taking in every detail again. The older man was still focused on his phone, slouched as if he owned the air around him. The girl still sat stiff, hands folded, gaze low. She hadn't moved at all since the signal. Her soda can sat untouched, warm under the sun. Jack's instincts screamed, "Do something." But his mind whispered, "Careful. One wrong move, and this could explode." He remembered a lesson drilled into him during his Marine days. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. Rushing gets people hurt. Precision saves them. Jack let out a long, quiet breath, his eyes scanning the layout of the rest stop once again like a soldier studying a map. 3 parked cars, his truck on the far edge, a silver sedan near the trees, and a dusty van closer to the exit ramp. 2 picnic tables, a vending machine shack, and 1 narrow driveway leading back to the highway. No one else around, no one watching. That could be good or very bad if the man panicked and tried to run. There would be no witnesses. If he became violent, no one would be there to stop him but Jack, and Jack was okay with that. He wasn't looking for a fight. But if a fight came to him, he wouldn't hesitate. Not when someone's life was on the line. He slid his phone from his pocket again, this time moving as naturally as if he were checking the time. His thumb hovered over the call button on the emergency number he had already typed. He could call now. He could whisper his location, get the police here. But what if the man saw him on the phone? What if the man noticed and bolted with the girl before help arrived? Jack's eyes drifted back to the girl. Oh, she still looked like stone, but something in her shoulders seemed ready to snap. She was waiting for someone to choose her side. Jack made his decision. He would stay close. He would keep the man here. And he would get the girl out safely, even if it meant confronting him. It all had to be done in one smooth, motion-like disarming. A live grenade. He rose from the bench casually, stretching his arms above his head like he was just loosening his muscles after sitting too long. He even yawned, forcing the tension out of his face. Inside, every part of him was alert, sharp, and ready. He walked slowly across the parking lot, heading in their direction, but not directly at them, circling wide as if heading toward the vending machine again. His boots crunched softly on the pavement. He kept his steps steady and unhurried, like a man with nowhere to be, When he got closer, maybe 15 feet away, he caught the girl's eyes again for the briefest moment. It was like looking into a silent alarm. Her gaze flickered to him. Then, away fast. Like she was afraid even looking at him might give her away. Jack's pulse thudded in his ears. The man glanced up at Jack as he passed. Just for a second, then returned to his phone. But Jack caught at the flash of watchfulness in his eyes, like a snake checking the distance to a boot heel. Jack pretended not to notice. Instead, he walked past them and stopped near the vending machine, fishing coins from his pocket and humming softly under his breath as if he didn't have a care in the world. He leaned slightly, pretending to read the drink options all the while. His ears were tuned to every sound, the soft shuffle of the girl's shoes, the faint scratch of the man's fingernail on his phone screen. Jack tapped his phone screen, while keeping it hidden behind his leg, opening the dialer again. This time he lowered the volume all the way and whispered when the operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? A soft voice came. This is Jack, he murmured, barely moving his lips. Rest stop off Route 17, mile marker 62. Young girl. Possible abduction. Silent SOS sign. Man with her. White, mid-40s, gray shirt, black cap. She looks terrified. Please send units. Quiet approach. Units are on the way. The dispatcher replied quickly. Stay safe, stay nearby. Don't alert him. Jack locked his phone and slipped it back into his pocket in one smooth motion. Now came the hardest part. Keeping them here till help arrived. If the man got suspicious or decided to leave, this could turn into a chase. Jack needed to slow him down without letting him know he was being slowed. He picked up a bag of chips from the machine and turned back casually toward them, putting on his most relaxed smile. Hey, he called lightly, walking a few steps closer. Do either of you know if there's a gas station up ahead? My GPS keeps losing signal. The man looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. The girl didn't move. There's one about 10 miles down, the man said after a pause, his tone flat. Thanks, Jack replied with easy friendliness. You two headed that way too? Yeah, the man muttered, looking back down at his phone. Jack kept his tone casual. Cool. Mind if I sit for a minute? Long drive. Back's killing me. The man gave a short shrug without looking at him. Jack smiled faintly as he walked over, every step measured. He sat on the far end of their bench, not too close to seem threatening, but close enough to block the girl's path if the man tried to drag her away. It was risky, very risky, but Jack had made his choice. He would sit here, calm and silent as stone, and hold the line until help arrived. And if help didn't get here in time, he would handle it himself. Jack sat on the edge of the bench, bag of chips crinkling softly in his hands, his posture loose but his mind razor sharp. The older man gave him a brief side glance, a quick flick of the eyes that carried just enough annoyance to be noticeable. The girl didn't react at all. She still sat like a fragile sculpture carved from fear and silence. The air around them felt heavier now, like the moment before a summer storm when the sky turns dark, though the sun still shines. Jack could feel his heart beating with slow, steady force, every thump echoing in his ears. He knew the police were on their way, but on their way could mean 5 minutes or 15. Out here, tucked between lonely trees and cracked asphalt, minutes could stretch like hours. And if this man decided to leave before the police arrived, the girl would vanish back into the shadows she came from. Jack couldn't let that happen. He had to keep them here. That meant keeping the man calm, distracted, and still. Jack tore the corner of the chip bag and popped one into his mouth with deliberate laziness. Road trips, he said lightly, pretending to chuckle. Always think they'll be relaxing, but they end up feeling like a marathon. The man looked up briefly, eyebrows twitching. Yeah, he said flatly, before dropping his gaze back to his phone. Jack nodded like they were just two strangers, killing time. He chewed slowly, keeping his voice smooth and casual.
Yes.
You two coming from far out. The man hesitated a moment, too long before answering. Couple states over, he muttered. Nice, Jack replied, smiling faintly. I used to do cross-country runs all the time. Got tired of seeing the same road signs over and over. Everything starts to look the same after a while, huh? Guess so, the man said, without looking up. The girl's head tilted just slightly, almost like she was listening closer now. Jack caught it out of the corner of his eye, careful not to make it obvious. He kept going, laying out his words like pieces of bait, trying to reel the man's mind into small talk. If the man was talking, he wasn't thinking about leaving. Jack stretched his legs in front of him, sighing like someone who had no worries in the world. Been through here before, he said. This rest stop's kind of creepy at night. Ever seen it after dark? The man snorted lightly. Nah. Lucky, Jack said with a small grin. Once saw a raccoon try to steal someone's burger. Thing walked off like it owned the place. The man actually smiled faintly at that, just for a second. It was thin and cold, but it was something. Jack noted it silently. He could work with that. While talking, he kept listening, the distant hum of the highway. The dry rattle of leaves. The faint chirp of a bird somewhere deep in the trees. No sirens yet. Not even close. He needed to buy more time. He crumpled the chip bag and tossed it into the trash can nearby, standing up casually. I should grab another drink, he said lightly. Want anything, my treat? The man shook his head without. Looking up, we're good. Jack turned to the girl deliberately, giving her the smallest, softest smile. Not enough to draw suspicion, just enough for her to see it and know someone was on her side. Water. It's hot out, he offered gently. She glanced up quickly, her eyes wide for a second, then shook her head. It was fast and sharp, but her lips pressed together afterward like she was holding something in. Jack didn't push. All right, he said kindly, as if her answer had been normal. Stay hydrated, though. He walked to the vending machine again, pulling out his phone in the shadow of the metal casing. He checked the screen, no missed call yet from dispatch. He typed quickly with his thumb. Still here, they haven't moved. ETA. A reply came almost instantly. Units, 5 minutes out. Approach, silent. Jack's chest loosened just a little. 5 minutes. He could hold 5 minutes. He had held longer under fire before. He slipped the phone away and returned to the bench, sitting back down casually. The man gave him another brief side eye, then looked back at his phone. His thumbs tapping faster now. Nervous. Jack noticed that he knew this moment, the crack before the break. The man was getting restless. Jack needed to anchor him in place. Man. Jack said suddenly, smiling like a man telling a random story. You ever get one of those flat tires in the middle of nowhere? Happened to me once in Kansas. Middle of the night, nothing but cornfields. Thought I was going to be abducted by aliens. The man snorted, a small puff of laughter escaping his nose. He looked up at Jack, just for a second, amused despite himself. Seriously? Jack said, grinning wider. Darkest night I've ever seen. Heard something moving in the corn. I swear, if something had touched my shoulder, I'd have screamed louder than a toddler. This time, the man gave a quick, sharp laugh before catching himself and returning to his blank expression. But Jack saw the shift. The man was loosening. Distracted, the tension in his shoulders had dipped just a fraction. And that was all Jack needed, just a fraction more time. He glanced subtly toward the road. Nothing yet. No flashing lights. 5 minutes. Just 5 more minutes. Jack leaned back on the bench, folding his arms like he had nowhere to be. He smiled faintly at the trees, playing the part of a wandering traveler with nothing on his mind, while every part of his soul stayed focused on the man beside the terrified girl. He would sit here as long as it took, because every second he kept them here was a second closer to saving her life. Asterisk. The air felt heavier with each passing second, though the world around them still looked calm. The trees whispered gently in the breeze. The sun glowed warm on the cracked pavement. A bird darted across the parking lot like a streak of black ink. To anyone passing by, this moment would have seemed quiet, ordinary, forgettable. But Jack could feel the storm building under its surface. He kept his body still, leaning slightly back on the bench like he was just another traveler taking a break, but his mind stayed locked on the girl. Every tiny detail about her screamed fear. The stiffness in her shoulders, the way her hands stayed clenched in her lap, the faint tremble in her fingers when she thought no one was watching. And then, the first time, she moved. Not much. Just a small shift, like the kind of movement people make when they're trying to quietly gather courage. Her eyes lifted, quick as a flash, scanning the trees, the vending machine, the parking lot, the exit ramp. And then, for the briefest moment, they landed on Jack. He didn't react. He kept his gaze on the trees, like he wasn't paying her any attention at all. But from the corner of his vision, he saw her lips part slightly. Then came the sound. It wasn't even a word, more like the smallest crack in a dam. A soft whisper, so thin it almost wasn't sound at all. Help me. Barely there, barely real. But Jack heard it. Every cell in his body heard it. For half a second, the world seemed to go silent. Even the wind held its breath. He didn't turn his head. He didn't let the man see the explosion of alertness surging through him. He just slowly nodded, once as if he were simply agreeing with his own thoughts. But that tiny nod was for her. She saw it. He knew she saw it. Her lips pressed together tightly, and her eyes glistened with something fierce. Hope fighting through the fear. That was the moment Jack stopped thinking about possibilities. He started thinking about this. His mind began building a plan in quiet, rapid pieces. The police were almost here, maybe 2 minutes now. Maybe less, but 2 minutes could be a lifetime if the man sensed something was wrong. If he stood up, if he grabbed her, if he tried to run. Jack's jaw tightened. He wouldn't let that happen. The key was to stay calm, to move slow, to be the calmest person in the storm so the storm didn't see him coming. He spoke again, his voice low and relaxed, like he was telling another road story. You know, he said, smiling faintly at the man, these benches remind me of boot camp. Sitting around forever, waiting for orders that never come. Boot camp? The man asked, glancing at him. Yeah, Jack said smoothly, cracking a small grin. Marine Corps, back when I still had knees that worked. The man chuckled quietly and shook his head. Explains why you sit so straight. Can't shake the habit, Jack replied with a laugh. That small conversation was enough to make the man look at him instead of the girl. And while the man's eyes were off her for just those few seconds, Jack let his hand drop casually to his knee and tapped his finger once. Slow, against the wood. The girl's eyes followed it. He didn't need words. The message was simple. Stay calm. I'm here. Don't move yet. She blinked slowly, almost like a nod, and lowered her gaze again. Jack's heartbeat thudded with controlled power. He could feel time collapsing around them, seconds burning away like paper near fire. He heard it then, very faint. Far away but growing closer, the low hum of tires on asphalt. The deep engine rumble that didn't belong to passing travelers. Police. They were coming. Jack's mind sharpened like a blade. He needed to control this last minute perfectly. He needed the man seated, relaxed, distracted, until the officers were close enough to take over. If the man even suspected what was happening, this could go bad fast. Jack stretched his legs out and pretended to wince at his knee. "Old injury," he muttered with a grin. "Bet you're smarter and don't do crazy stuff like jump out of planes." The man smirked faintly. "Nah, I like staying on the ground." Jack smiled like he'd expected that answer. Inside, he was counting heartbeats. The girl stayed still, completely still. But there was something new in her posture now. Something small but powerful, like a candle flickering to life in the dark. She knew help was coming. Jack slowly let his hand slide toward his phone, hidden by the fold of his shirt. He didn't need to call again. He just needed it ready. If something went wrong in these final seconds, he would be faster than the man. Faster and harder. He glanced at the exit road, then he saw it a shimmer of sunlight on glass. The flash of a car, grell weaving quietly between the trees, unmarked, silent. The police. They were almost here. Jack drew one more slow breath. His body still as stone, but his soul on fire. This was it. The next moments would decide everything. The girl's escape wasn't just possible now. It was about to happen. Asterisk, the moment hung in the air like a stretched thread. Thin and trembling, ready to snap, Jack kept his eyes on the trees, not letting the man see the storm building inside him. The girl stayed frozen, like a shadow carved into the bench. To anyone else, it might have looked like nothing was happening at all, but Jack's trained senses caught the smallest signals. The ones people missed unless they'd lived through. Chaos. The police were here. He could feel it. The low hum of tires was growing louder. Slow and controlled, like predators circling. He saw the faint ripple of sunlight off a windshield behind the far pine trees. The vehicle moved deliberately, not rushing, keeping quiet so it didn't spook the target. Jack shifted just slightly on the bench, rolling his shoulders like a man stretching his back. In reality, it was his signal, casual, invisible to the girl. "Hold on, don't move. It's almost over." She gave the tiniest nod. Her eyes lowered again, but he saw the faint tremble in her chest as she breathed. It was no longer fear that made her shake. It was hope fighting to break out of the cage. Jack's jaw tightened. He knew this moment was the most dangerous. Trapped people often didn't get rescued quietly. Sometimes fear made them bolt too soon. Sometimes the captor sensed something was off and lashed out like a cornered animal. Jack needed this to look normal, boring, safe until it was too late for the man to react. He forced a laugh and patted his knee. "If I sit here much longer, this old leg's gonna lock up," he said, shaking his head at the man. The man chuckled. "Yeah, sitting too long makes me stiff too." Jack smiled lightly, while inside his mind sharpened like a blade. He kept the man's attention pinned on him. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it. The cruiser found it rolled silently into the edge of the lot, half hidden behind a cluster of tall shrubs. No lights, no siren. Just a dark, steady shape gliding like a shadow across the pavement. Jack felt a surge of fierce relief, though he kept his face calm. Another vehicle pulled in from the far side, a second unmarked car. Perfect. They were surrounding the area. His phone buzzed faintly against his leg. A message. He let his hand slide over it like he was scratching his thigh and glanced quickly. One word lit the screen. Close. Jack's pulse thudded like a drum. He stood up slowly, deliberately stretching his arms overhead as if working out stiffness. The man barely glanced at him, still lost in his phone. "Gonna grab another drink," Jack said casually, nodding toward the vending machines. "Want one?" "Nah," the man mumbled, eyes on his screen. Jack smiled faintly and turned away, walking toward the vending machine, but his mind was laser-focused. As he passed behind the girl, He let one fingertip brush lightly across the back of the bench near her elbow. It was the smallest gesture, invisible from the man's angle, but it carried everything he needed her to know. Stay calm. Wait. Trust. Me? She didn't move, but her breathing deepened, her shoulders lowering just slightly, like she was finally letting herself believe she was going to make it out. Jack reached the vending machines and stood there, pretending to scan the buttons. He angled his body just enough to see past the glass front. 2 officers were slipping silently from the cars now, moving low and smooth like shadows. One pointed at the man and lifted 2 fingers, asking if he was the target. Jack's reply was the faintest tilt of his chin. The officers split without a sound. One drifted wide, circling through the trees toward the rear. The other crept closer, crouched low behind the concrete trash bin. Jack's body thrummed with coiled energy. This was it, the moment where chaos could explode or vanish like smoke. The officer by the trash bin moved in fast, silent. Jack saw the flash of metal cuffs glinting in his hand. And then everything happened at once. The rear officer broke from the trees, striding in with quiet power. The one by the trash bin rose up suddenly, voice sharp but controlled. "Police, don't move." The man's head snapped up. His phone clattered from his hand. He started to rise, but Jack was already there. He moved like lightning, every muscle remembered a lifetime of battle. He stepped between the man and the girl, one arm shooting out to block him, the other shoving the bench back just enough to keep her behind him. "Stay down," Jack barked, his voice a hard command. The man froze. Shock wide in his eyes just long enough for the officers to close in. They were on him in seconds, pinning his arms, snapping cold metal around his wrists. Up. The man shouted, struggled, cursed. But it was useless. The officers held him like steel dot. Jack turned to the girl. "Hey," he said softly now, his voice breaking from its hard edge, becoming human again. "You're safe. It's over." Her eyes were huge, shining, her lips trembling. For a heartbeat, she didn't move, as if her mind couldn't believe it yet. Then she whispered, "Thank you." So softly it was almost air. Jack gave her the smallest smile. "You don't need to thank me. You just breathe now. That's your only job." She nodded shakily, and one of the officers gently guided her away, speaking softly. Wrapping a blanket from the cruiser around her shoulders, Jack stood still for a long moment, breathing deep, letting the tension drain from his muscles. Like water from a broken dam, the man was shouting as they pushed him into the back of the cruiser. The girl sat in another car, curled in the blanket, finally blinking like someone seeing daylight for the first time after being buried. Underground, Jack watched her as the fear drained from her face, replaced by something fragile but powerful: freedom. And for the first time that day, he let himself exhale fully. She was safe. It was over.